Okay, so I was watching X-Men 97. I know I'm behind, but I'm watching it. So I'm going to start with the usual thing that I just never understand: Jean, Cyclops, and Wolverine. Cyclops, not Cyclops, but Wolverine be fiending for that man's wife in front of him. Like he does not care. He fully knows that woman is never, she is never leaving Cyclops. And he just be like upset that she loves her husband, that she loves her man. He has forever been upset that this woman loves her man, and he, y'all, I always, that was always so confusing, always so confusing, and the team just go along with it. Like the team just understand that he in love with her. Cyclops understand that Wolverine is in love with Jean. Jean understands that Wolverine is in love with her, and you're like, it gets so confusing. So let's get into now. I'm gonna skip around a little bit, but we're gonna go into spoiler alert. When they found out it was an OG gene and a duplicate gene, right? And so OG gene really couldn't remember anything, and so they sent Cyclops. Now let's all remember this now. They left OG Jean at the house after they found out it was her. Cyclops went with everybody else to go get the baby back from Sinister, and I think she named her name herself Dark Goblin or something like that, Queen Goblin or something like that, to go get baby Nathan, right? So he off there with the clone to go, to go fight the clone to get the thing. OG Jean, real Jean, really can't remember nothing, right? She can't hardly remember anything. Wolverine pulls her to him and was telling her, like, remember the love that you have for me, that I have for you. And she got a whole husband. And this woman looks at him and says, you really love me that much? And he's like, you don't know the half of it, or something like that. I ain't got the exact word. But she basically went in, read how much he really loved her. And then he tells this married woman, oh, you don't know the half of it. And everybody is okay with that. Like, Scott gotta be out his mind. Every day he gotta be out his mind. Like, how do you accept that your coworker is in love, forever in love with your wife, and when he gets upset, when Wolverine gets upset, his wife, this is if you even watched the original series, when Wolverine gets upset, Jean, Scott's wife, goes and comforts Wolverine, always had, and then he go walk off angry because he gotta watch the woman that he's in love with be in love with somebody else, and he stayed with the team, and then they have a whole baby, and before we knew it was a clone, backing it up, before we even knew that it was a clone, and they having the baby, again, Scott leaves his pregnant wife to go run a mission, right? And leaves his wife in the hands of the man who's in love with her. Now, I will say, I think the reason why Scott does that, and has always felt comfortable with that, is because he knows outside of him and the professor, Wolverine will die saving Jean. Will die saving Jean. And that is why he like leaves her in his care so much, because he knows if Wolverine is there, no one is going to touch her, harm her. She gonna be good. And sometimes if you really looked at it, if you looked at the movies, you looked at all the shows, it seemed like, and this is just me, it seemed like Wolverine always went that little extra mile in making sure Jean was okay versus Scott did. And say what you want, argue with somebody else about it, but that's always how I felt. It almost felt like Wolverine felt like if he just did this little bitty thing, he could pull her away from them. Now, we're going to skip up to a couple of episodes in the current series in 97 where they're in the water and she's just pulling out these water bubbles of memories, and she turns around, she ended up kissing Wolverine. And then she gets to Scott, and then finds out that Scott is communicating with the clone, but Scott has feelings for the clone because the clone is the person that he went through childbirth with. And that gets us over to the Jean Scott dilemma, right? And he talking about he confused, he don't know what to believe, and he arguing with her. To me, that was the foulest thing. That was the foulest thing when he tried to argue with OG Jean about her feelings or memories. He's like, is it your memories? You know, do you... What did he answer so simple? He's like, do you remember loving me, or do you have a feeling? Like she had any control of it whatsoever. And that, I was like, that's some BS. But he has, again, his thing of like, I'm abandoning my son. And I just, that weird dynamic. And then because you wanted clone Jean, because she had to let her son, because that was her child, she had to let her son go. You know, because Cyclops, like, I can't be a part of it. Had to let her son go. And that's why I felt bad for clone Jean. She had to let her son go, but then she also had to let go of the life she thought she had and the man she thought was hers. And so I had a lot of, like, at first I felt bad for OG Jean, but really, clone Jean really, that really pulled, because you gotta let go of your baby, you gotta let go of your man, and you gotta let go of the life you thought you had. But woo, when OG Jean found out that he was still communicating with clone Jean, because the two of them are connected, that was wild. That was wild. But I always thought that was interesting. Growing up watching X-Men, being introduced to X-Men. Now, before we oh, excuse me, bless me. Before we get into any deep oh, excuse me, bless me. Before we get into any deeper things, I want to also make this statement, and this may be a statement people don't like, but I always felt this from the very first episode of X-Men I ever watched, the original one. I, right now, still, after so many years, don't understand what's the purpose of Jubilee. I think, and this is the thing that I have with Jubilee. I think one of the biggest mistakes they made with Jubilee is the sound of her powers. And I know her name is Jubilee, but then pew, 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 always seems like a party. And I know she was one of the baby X-Men, but it always seemed like a party with her, and her as she developed in the series. They should have in this thing, made her powers, I want to say, a different color, because those are like sparklers. I don't know the difference between calling her Jubilee and calling her Sparkler Girl. Because that's what it's like. It's because I've never seen her in a fight, and maybe this is just my memory failing me some, where her power actually did some significant damage. Now in 97, she's in that game and doing something, and the future her showed up and said, oh, we're going to do these things, But I mean, they should have had her doing those things, like those big girl things, in the original one. Because I just always saw her as a liability. Now, speaking of another liability, I just got through talking about her. I'm gonna say this, and I don't care how powerful she is. I don't care how many mystical universe thing energies connect with her. To me, Jean Grey herself is one of the weakest X-Men. And the reason why I say this, you may not like it. If every time you use your power, you pass out, then you're automatically putting the team at risk, because now they got to protect you. And the thing I never understood, folks, is she would use her power and be like, yeah, Jean, then how come the team wasn't planning for that? It happens all the time. Jean passing out happens all the time. Everybody else can use their power and not pass out, but Jean uses her power for a good 4 minutes, or not even sometimes 4 minutes, but you will give her 4 minutes, and then when everything is like, she just passed out. What is that? What is that? Somebody tell me, what is that? You exhaust yourself to the point to where you become unconscious every time you use your powers? I don't think she is as great of a student as Professor Xavier may have thought she was. And I'm going to stand 10 toes down on that, because, and I know animation and the animations and the comic books are different. Let me put that out there. But I'm speaking on the animations here. You should not be passing out every time you use your powers. And if you are, one, how come the team ain't prepared for that? And two, you got Beast. When, spoiler alert, when Storm lost her powers, Beast was in the lab. So you can tell me Beast can get in the lab, determine that there was 2 genes, OG gene and clone gene, look and determine that what happened to Storm was permanent, possibly permanent, but he can't whip up nothing. He can't whip up nothing that would stop Jean from passing out after she uses her power. Scott, you want to tell me he can't do that? That's where I'm like, this is all. That's where I'm sorry. Say what you want. But if you pass out every time you use your powers, you're weak. Because now your team has to protect you. Your team has to protect you if the threat isn't fully extinguished. And that's, to me, that's what makes her a liability. Now you're talking to a woman who loved the Phoenix, who was obsessed with the Dark Phoenix, okay? But no, baby, you can't be passing out. Because every time you pass out, every time Jean passes out, she immediately becomes a liability because the missions aren't done. The missions aren't done. So you passing out, well, and people need your support. She said, what is she, like a superhero filler? You already causing beef. Well, she's not the cause of that beef. I ain't gonna put that on her. There's already beef that exists between two of the members of the X-Men because of her existence. Because two men love her, which isn't her fault, but two men love her, so beef exists. So now when you also get in a fight, then you're gonna pass out. And wait a minute, when she was, gosh, I can't remember that man's when she was going into that man's, golly, what is that man's name? Into that man's mind to do the his brain. It seemed like if somebody has just a door in their mind, it becomes too much for her. And she's like, I can't. Scott! That's her. She's like, Scott! And he gets up, Jean, what is it? I'm sorry. But so this is just like my first part. I'm going next time we're gonna talk about Magneto, because I gotta talk about that Magneto. We gotta talk about Magneto. Okay, so all right, so we're gonna end it right here. But I know somebody out there agree. Jean just be playing too much. She not getting enough sleep. She not eating enough stuff. She missing some vitamins, needs some supplements. Because by as many times as she faint, they should have developed something that prevented her from fainting. That's all I got to say.